Okay, thank you everybody. I thought I'd get started with the session. It's always difficult having the session after lunch. People are often a bit sleepy. So I'll try to make it a little bit interactive. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. If I start speaking too quickly, you just tell me to slow down. Or if I'm too quiet, just tell me to speak up a bit. So my name is Charles NDUKA. I'm a surgeon, a clinician, and I founded MTech Labs, a company to change the way we understand human health. You know, glasses are an incredible technology. They've enabled us to see the world. They've enabled us to see the world differently. And in future, they will enable us to see ourselves and see ourselves differently. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So obviously, seeing the world is obvious. This invention enabled people who previously would no longer be able to be productive once you hit middle age, as many of us are. And now you could see more, do more, and go further. And that's what this next generation of glasses will do. They will enable us all to see more, do more, and go further. It's interesting that the early excitement around smart glasses has often been around navigation. The early Google Glass ideas, many of the technologies you'll see around today in the smart glasses section, they talk about early use cases being about navigation. And that's quite interesting, and I'll tell you why. This is the new Meta display glasses. Again, navigation is often used as a primary use case because it allows you to get from where you are to where you want to be with less friction, less traffic, and less accidents. And that's the same with health. This is Charlie Munger. He was the partner of Warren Buffett, billionaire, died at age 100. And he said that, you know, all I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there. And that's a really important thing. We need to understand the causes of negative outcomes. We need to know early so we can predict and avoid them. So why now? Why is there so much excitement right now about smart glasses? Well, it's a convergence of a number of different things that have all come together. Obviously, health is a massive issue. 70% of premature deaths are due to behavioral factors. These are things that could have been changed, such as diet and emotions. Now, in another sphere, in transport, we know how to reduce the number of preventable deaths. Air travel used to be very dangerous, very hazardous, yet now it is the safest way to travel, by far. How? By the use of sensors to understand potential issues, by using connected devices, by having a dashboard, having a black box data to allow you to learn from past errors and then build forward into the future. And that analogy should happen in health, because right now, we are in a health crisis. One of the other technologies that you may know about is digital twins. So many companies, Boeing and others, they use sensors within the engine itself to understand potential issues around maintenance. They literally create a copy of the engine that's digital, and it tells them when you need maintenance, when there's a potential source of error, and also to help design better ways of doing things. Again, we haven't applied this idea to health. It's happening in all sorts of areas of industrial manufacturing and elsewhere. But the most important thing that most people would give all their resources towards, i.e. having a high quality life, is not being looked at. Now, moving from planes to cars, you know, we are seeing with cars with sensors. This is the Tesla, but obviously there are other cars as well. They have multiple cameras. These are sensors. They have proximity sensors, they have radars, and this is going to cut the number of accidental deaths by at least 90%. We're seeing it already. Waymo in California, it's quite magical. Get into a car and it's able to take you to your destination using sensors alone without causing issues. So these principles then are established. You can use sensors, you can use digital twins to reduce negative outcomes. I guess you can think of it a bit like traffic jams. This is what's happening right now in health. We're spending all of our resources on dealing with problems after they've occurred. We're spending all the money on the trucks, on the pickup things, but we're not spending any time on trying to prevent people landing in hospital with an issue. And that can change through the use of data. So the two leading causes of premature death are related to diet and emotions. And when I say diet, I mean both the direct effects in terms of things like diabetes, but also things such as cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, strokes, also things such as cancers. Between 30 and 40% of solid cancers are related to obesity. And obesity is growing at an incredible rate. So it's a huge problem. And it's really hard to improve what we can't measure. So you go to a doctor and he asks you, or she asks you, how do you feel? Now it's kind of crazy that in 2025, the best tool we have to understand how a person feels is a questionnaire, a pen and paper. Things haven't changed in 200, 300 years in healthcare. Yet for cardiology, you have an ECG, you now have Apple Watch detecting heart rhythm problems. For diabetes, you've got sensors you can wear on your body to measure your blood glucose. But we don't have any technology today that can measure your emotional responses. As I say, we've seen how some areas of life have been improved through the use of miniaturized sensors, but we don't have anything that can tackle that issue of an emotion meter. So we need to move away from this idea of taking subjectivity, asking questions, the issues around people having a faulty memory, the issues around people remembering the most recent things, to move towards continuous, real-time, real-world data. We've gone a bit further from pen and paper to a smartphone. Yes, you can ask questions. This is the Apple Watch. It has an app called the PHQ-9, and it asks you questions every so often. How do you feel? How do you feel now? How do you feel now? Obviously, again, it's a problem. If you're measuring sporadically, you may measure over time and get 3 readings that are all the same. But what's happening between times? What's happening between those measures? You have no idea. Currently, as a doctor, I'm blind to know what happens to my patients when they're not in the clinic. And even between appointments, patients can fluctuate tremendously. This graph shows, if you imagine a year, 365 dots, and these colors represent symptoms, they will fluctuate tremendously. And yet, when you go to the doctor, the dark blue, they may only ever find out about what happened that previous week, but with no idea what's going on between times. And so there is a huge issue here, and it's a data problem. And that data mostly is related to our lifestyle. Because as I say, most of the health issues are too late, it's the crash, and we should try to deal with the behavior that causes the crash. So miniaturization of sensors has been a tremendous benefit. We've seen this in computing. We now have devices that are incredibly small. Some of the smart glasses are now extraordinary in terms of how they've managed to shrink things down. Apple have shown how you can miniaturize all the electronics down to this small part of the phone. That problem is largely solved in terms of miniaturization. And it's funny, if you think about it, this video came out a few years ago talking about how technology's moved and how things that were physical have now become miniaturized and digital or virtual. You've taken things such as the camera, the scanner, the telephone, all these things have become apps on devices. We've taken paper, largely gone. But it's interesting when you look at this, as the various devices, as the physical things have disappeared, they become digitalized, they become virtualized, they become shareable, they become cheaper, which is important, and democratized because more people can access them. But once you've gone down to the very last stage of this process, what are you left with? In this, you're left with glasses, of course, a phone and a laptop. So even though that smart glasses area wasn't known about, underneath it all, somebody was aware of it. And so right now, in America, almost 50% of people, and certainly Gen Zs, it's over 50%, have some sort of wearable device. Many people use them every day. And last year, almost over 500 million were sold. So it's happening. There have been many false dawns, but it's happening now. There's no doubt about it. And smart glasses upcoming. Last year, at least 2 million devices from Meta sold. You've seen the launch last week, had a huge amount of interest. We know that it's a market that's growing tremendously. And I would say that analog glasses will be like analog watches were 30 years ago. It's going to seem kind of strange, or maybe just a bit stylish, to have an analog pair of glasses in future, given all the other benefits it can provide to you. You know, we've done surveys, others have done surveys. Most people would be willing to wear glasses if it provides them with health benefits, in the same way that more than half of you here are wearing regular glasses to allow you to see more, to do more, and go further. But we need new kinds of sensors. This is a very early form of gyroscope, and now we have an IMU in your phone that rotates the screen, and now we have IMUs in glasses that can help you work out your gait and your balance, etc. But we don't have anything that can measure this critical part that we use and that we have evolved to engender trust and interaction, that is the human face. This picture is from someone playing poker. This is to try to hide the fact that they had some good cards. The face is very special. Tell me, put your hand up if you think that A is winning. Hands up for A. Hands up for B. One of them must be winning. You don't know. Why? It's written all over the face. So we implicitly understand how people are feeling and their intentions based on this naked, flexible part of our body that evolved specifically to communicate to others that perhaps we need help, or our emotions, or that we're confused or frustrated. And obviously, as babies, they're helpless unless they can engender help from others or communicate how they're feeling, or that they're surprised, or that they want to be changed maybe, or that the food maybe is not to their liking, or that something's surprising to them. These are things that we evolved, but we currently have no means of having an insight into this. Now, decades of research have shown that our faces do reveal deep insights around our intentions, our feelings, our emotions, also things such as our dietary behaviors and our cognition. There's some specific medical conditions like Parkinson's disease where changes in facial expressivity occur a decade or more before you see the more classic symptoms of tremor. And so this is a unique facet of our being that can communicate things that we otherwise don't know about. But how can you do it with a wearable? Obviously, we can't walk around like this device used for computers for animation. People have tried with virtual reality headsets to put cameras pointing at the face to do remote interaction with avatars. But that's clearly not going to be practical for glasses. You can't use a smartphone because you can't walk around all day with a device like this, although some people seem to do that all the time. So if you're going to have something you're going to wear on your face, it has to be compact, lightweight, low power, and highly accurate. Electromyography is a technology you may have heard a bit about recently because Meta, with their new wristband, have used EMG, electromyography, to control devices via wrist gestures. And we spent our first 8 years as a company exploring EMG for facial expressions in virtual reality to build our initial models. It's very accurate. It's a gold standard way of understanding emotion is EMG on specific parts of the face to measure this quantity called emotional valence. And you can map it, you map emotions onto this two-dimensional axis of activation, arousal, and positive and negativity. So we decided to see what could we do that was non-contact but still gave us the same quality of data. And over the last 6 years, we've been building multiple prototypes, further miniaturizing the technology to get to a point where we have something that is usable. We've been publishing research in peer-reviewed journals around the use of a technology, and we've shown that we're able to detect depressed versus non-depressed people with as little as 30 minutes of data. This was published by neuroscientist and psychiatrist Professor James Stone in Frontiers of Psychiatry in 2023. That was using the larger version of our glasses, and he's currently doing a new study using the smaller glasses for looking at bipolar disorder. So we now have opportunities for understanding things that otherwise it's just impossible to know. And this heralds the idea of a new kind of dashboard, not for navigating via car, but for navigating your life. How can you get from where you are now to where you want to get to without having the missteps or detours or accidents that can shorten your journey and decrease your lifespan? So as I mentioned, I'm a doctor. I'm actually a plastic surgeon by background, and I deal with facial paralysis. This gentleman had a tumor that caused damage to his facial nerves, and the big motivation to start this company was to see whether we can develop a technique to give people feedback on their facial expressions in real time, because I would spend 6 hours on surgery to move muscles and transfer nerves, but the patients have to do the rehabilitation. Without the rehabilitation, there's scarring and things don't move and it doesn't work. And I do these operations, the patient would come back, they haven't been doing exercise, and I would ask them, what's happened? Why haven't you done your exercises? And the problem was that after an operation, you're often a bit swollen, a bit bruised. They hate the way they look anyway, and now you're asking them to spend even more time looking in the mirror to try to work on their exercises. They wouldn't do it. And this motivated the idea of seeing whether we could develop a new way of giving real-time, real-world feedback to patients with facial paralysis. Now, of course, this is a very small market. It's impossible to do that and have it affordable for that niche use case. And this is why it's been amazing to see how our partners and collaborators have come to us with new ideas around using it for Parkinson's, for depression, for bipolar, for autism. As you know, autism, people struggle with recognizing the expressions of others and responding appropriately. So this is a whole new paradigm of health that can help across a number of areas, both for clinical and non-clinical areas. Dietary health, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second, is where we're starting, because it allows us to use our existing sensors that are a little bit big, but in a form factor that looks pretty normal. For diagnosis, your doctor gives you antidepressants, and right now they'll give you a questionnaire 2 weeks later to say, how do you feel now? Now, who here remembers how they felt 2 weeks ago on Wednesday, or 3 weeks ago? It's impossible, and it's ridiculous that in this day and age, that's the best that we have currently, and that's what's being used by pharmaceutical companies to develop new treatments. They're using these very, very basic, archaic tools to understand whether these powerful drugs are working or not. We need to have something that's similar to the ECG or the glucose monitor, but for mental health. We've also been approached by a company who wants to understand sentiment. That's to say, how people feel about the products or things that they interact with. So in the case of, for example, movies and TV and gaming, to be able to understand whether this comedy is actually funny or whether that plot line was a bit confusing. And we've done work with them where we give the glasses and they have a screening. So they have a similar numbers as here. They'll watch a film, and we basically have the real-time data on how people are responding to the film content, which is incredible because, again, like with medicine, up until now, they'll spend millions on a film and then they'll test it using questionnaires. Typically about 30% of the budget of the film is spent on marketing, and so to use such crude tools to work out whether the film is targeted at the right group seems a bit strange, but that's what they currently are doing. So our technology can be used for sentiment, and if you can imagine taking that into the real world, a place like a fairground or an art gallery or a Disneyland, to help to understand which are the happy places, which are the bad places, where's their friction, where's their traffic, where can you improve the experience of those people who are interacting in those spaces. And of course, the big future is around smart eyewear for augmented reality, spatial computing, where you're able to adapt content on the fly based on how a person's feeling, where a person's able to block out the things they don't want to experience, such as annoying adverts and pop-ups, where a person is able to have a truly personalized experience. That's going to be a game changer. We've seen how some of the platforms are optimized for negativity and people doom scroll and causes negativity to their mental health. If people could have insight to know that when I do this thing, i.e. spend time on these particular platforms, it causes my mood to go down, you can act on it. Because if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And so you can imagine how, with Waze, you had an app that uses sensor. It was a GPS, of course, that could help you to navigate from where you were to where you wanted to be. In this case, we're using sensors in terms of your emotions that can help you navigate through your life from where you are to where you want to be. With Waze, it can tell you where petrol stations are to make sure you have enough fuel. In the case of our technology, it can help you to ensure your diet is going to be one that's going to optimize for your well-being. In the case of Waze, they tell you where there are going to be potential problems like speed cameras. Eating speed, which I'll talk about a bit more about in a second, is a really key biomarker that people haven't been able to measure before in the real world. Valence is a word that means in psychology whether something is deemed positive or negative, and this is a core psychological construct. And being able to measure that, measure when a person is frustrated or confused, working out how to best plan their day or plan their interactions with colleagues, a huge opportunity in the future. And again, for optimizing and personalizing content. So you can take many of the parallels from transport across to how we navigate our own lives. Here are some of the conditions that can be improved by smart wearables. So for cognition, we have one collaborator in Northeastern Hospital, Professor Lisa Feldman-Barrett, looking at facial expressivity and dementia. Parkinson's disease, I mentioned before, is actually the second commonest cause of dementia, and it's a huge issue. If we could predict way in advance whether a person is now going down that pathway, we can intervene much earlier and improve quality of life. Multiple sclerosis, a condition that, again, causes lots of physical motor symptoms, could be picked up far, far earlier. Again, much like a tire that's slowly going down that you may not know about until it's too flat and may cause a problem, these things happen to us without us being aware. You know, there's no one who has got a hunchback like this who didn't at one point have a point where they could have intervened and stopped themselves getting to that point. Similarly, there's no one who became obese that couldn't have had earlier inputs, earlier intervention to help to avoid that problem that's going to cause them other issues later on, such as problems with their back, with their knees, etc. A whole range of neurological diseases are also detectable because you have these glasses worn on the central axis of your body, so it measures your head movements, your expressions, your attention, so many different biomarkers. I've mentioned a bit more before about depression to bipolar. Stroke, again, facial expressivity is one of the cardinal signs of stroke, and you can use that to track progress and recovery. Away from the facial stuff, just looking at the posture and activity, you can measure gait very accurately. We've done a lot of work and published our research on looking at balance. When you're walking, you have a particular signature, and you can count steps, cadence, etc., posture. With facial expressions, some people clench their jaw very frequently and tightly. Again, we can measure that now with glasses because the muscles are activating. You can tag that to stress, and then with stress causing the pain, break the vicious cycle and improve. The glasses also measure eye movements in terms of blinking, and I would encourage you to go and visit our stand. We have a stand here, we have a demo there. Fatigue, working out which foods, which activities, which places cause your mood or your fatigue levels to drop. A huge opportunity to help preemptively to prevent accidents at work or whilst driving or whilst operating machinery. There's no need to have a camera pointing at the eye, which is actually quite power hungry. We can use our sensors, which I'll talk about more in a second. So facial optomography, what is it? So unlike a camera which captures frames, facial optomography that we invented and patented is a way of looking at muscle movements based on the vector. So on the glasses, we're sampling at between 2 and 6,000 hertz and looking purely at the movement in the XY plane in relation to the sensor. So whereas a camera is capturing frames and you're processing a lot of redundant information, facial optomography is looking at just the movements, and if you know where the muscle is, and obviously with my background as a plastic surgeon, this was the sort of inspiration that you could actually look at a certain number of places and use that to infer what's going on elsewhere. Because the face is quite unique in the body in that the muscles attach from bone to skin or from skin to skin, whereas elsewhere on the body it's from bone to tendon to muscle to tendon to skin to bone. This is Christian Grzewski, our data scientist. So this is the sort of rather bulky version of our glasses. That's the one we have here today. And getting them down to something that similar to what I'm wearing today is just a question of resources. You've seen how with the iPhone they've gone from a very big device that was used for the face scanner down to this tiny little island. It's just a question of resources and miniaturization. But able to read in real time expressions. So the map you see on the right side, this is the dimensional map we use to understand the emotions. And we use this, and you can tag that to events. So you can say, okay, well, when I have that meeting in the morning with that particular person, my mood tends to drop. Or I find that when I've had this kind of food, I'm feeling very low energy, etc., etc. So the components of our system are our patented sensor technology. We have algorithms that live on device, but also onto the connected phone. We have a dashboard. This is used by researchers to understand behaviors in controlled conditions. And then our cloud-based platform that enables either researchers or clinicians, in the case of dietitians that we're working with right now, to see multiple patients virtually and see how they're doing. And then the individual themselves has a smartphone app that they can use, again, to either provide context to the data or to give some degree of self-report in terms of what they're doing. And we're starting with diet because almost every aspect of health is related to diet. The cost to the economy, the world economy, is tremendous. In the US, almost 750,000 deaths are caused due to unhealthy diet. Almost all cases of type 2 diabetes could be cured by modifications in diet and physical activity. By adopting a Mediterranean diet, you can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's by 40%. And a lot of people think about health by what can you add? I'm going to take this supplement, I'm going to take this pill, this medication. But you should always subtract before you add. What can you subtract from your life in terms of processed foods, in terms of too many carbs, too many sugars, etc.? As I mentioned before, a large proportion of solid cancers, particularly bowel cancers, colon cancers, are related to obesity, which in turn is related to diet. It's been shown and known for many years that if you log your meals regularly and daily, if you're overweight, you're 3.5 times more likely to lose weight. It's partly because of mindfulness. You're now aware of what you're doing, and you can make a decision about whether you want to have that extra slice of cake or whatever. But it's boring. It's tedious. It's high friction. You've got to remember that your phone's got to be there. You've got to go and find the phone. You've got to open the app, choose the app, take a picture, edit it, make sure it's the correct one, and save it, and do that multiple times a day over time. But most people don't. The data shows that most people, they start very, very enthusiastic, and after a while, they stop doing it. The actual analysis of what you have is also difficult, because again, you have to say, okay, well, this quantity of food is this many calories, this amount of protein, this amount of carbohydrate. There isn't a technology right now that can make that process seamless and straightforward. You can't do it with a ring. You can't do it with the smartwatch, Apple Watch. You can't do it with any other device. You can get a late measure of what you've eaten based on the blood glucose. It will tell you something about it in terms of the carbohydrate content or sugar content. But there isn't a way right now that you can passively understand this key driver of your future longevity and health. So what we've enabled, and I say come and visit our stand, is a way to automate that process, to make it seamless. We have glasses that contain a downward-looking camera, and sensors in the temple automatically detect what you're doing. You start eating, it captures your meal, analyzes the meal with AI, and that becomes part of your log. So the process of logging your meal becomes now almost seamless. The difference between paying by cash and doing Apple Pay is an automated process. And by doing so, if you have a dietitian, for example, they could have the data, again, to guide you in terms of your behaviors. It's far easier to use it this way. And importantly, it gives people feedback and accountability. We've done some studies on this, and we have very high levels of accuracy. And also, and this is the important thing, about 60% of you eat quickly. Hands up who thinks they eat quickly or faster than average. Come on, hands up, rise up, rise up. Yeah, it's about the same proportion as typically when I ask the question. Now, what's interesting about it is that those people who eat more quickly than average are more likely to gain weight. You're going to add more calories per unit time. But more importantly that, you may not be overweight, but your metabolism is going to be affected, because what happens is you have a high spike of blood sugar. Your pancreas produces the insulin to try and get rid of that sugar because it's toxic in higher quantities. The insulin overshoots the quantity of sugar that you have, and that then causes a dump and causes a drop in your sugar. And then, an hour and a half later on, you're suddenly feeling either tired or hungry again. And even if you're not feeling tired and hungry again, that high blood sugar is causing issues, metabolic issues. And so we talk about obesity a lot in terms of diet, but actually a bigger number of people are affected with metabolic syndrome, which has a number of negative consequences. There are companies who are trying to address that, companies like Levels, where you wear a glucose monitor continuously. But again, that to me seems like a lag measure. It's measuring after the fact. What you really want to do is have the information beforehand. So much like with the car, you'll have a warning light that tells you you're going to have an accident. They don't want to tell you after you've had the accident that there's an issue there. And so it's been known for many years that eating quickly has negative metabolic effects. Up until now, it's never been possible to do anything about it, but we have a solution to that. We've just finished a 4-week trial. It's just about to be published, hopefully in about next month or 6 weeks or so, where we've shown that we are able to track people's eating behavior, able to give them feedback about eating, and to get them to slow down as well. And that's going to be a game changer. Much in the same way that we've seen fitness devices have modified people's physical health in terms of aerobic exercise, this is going to be about dietary health. Separate from metabolic health and obesity, there's also issues around gut issues. It can take people sometimes years, decades even, to learn that they have an intolerance to food. Why? Because the interval of time between action and consequence is often very long. So for example, myself, I discovered I had a sensitivity to a certain food type only 2 years ago when we started doing this work. Because you never work out what happens when you don't feel the symptoms until hours and hours later on. One of our participants in one of our studies, she was seeing a dietitian because she kept getting heartburn. And the dietitian said, well, you should eat more bread, avoid tomatoes and spicy foods. Only through the study that was actually not designed to be an intervention study did she learn that when she saw her food logs, whenever she had bread, subsequently her symptoms were worse. And so she was able to identify the source of her issues just by using the glasses. That was not something that we had intended upon. But it just goes to show that if you have data, you can make actionable decisions. And she was able to and she's very grateful for that. A lot of people suffer with inflammatory bowel disease, or irritable bowel disease, or reflux, dyspepsia. All these things are because they are unwittingly poisoning themselves, eating things that aren't right for them, and maybe following generic advice. Whereas what we should be doing is looking at what's personal to you. So the Glasses platform is able to capture a huge number of metrics, 28 unique types of metrics just from that one sensor type in the temple. It's highly accurate, and it's able to give people insights that otherwise it's just impossible to get. We know, talking to dietitians, they tell us that people do not do their logs, people do not give them information they need, and this is going to make that fast and easy. When talking about diet, people often say, oh, don't worry, there's Ozempic, there's Mounjaro, there's these GLP-1 medications that people are using to lose weight. Speaking as a doctor, those are a disaster. Apart from the fact that up to 50% of people will develop nausea side effects from these drugs because they slow down the stomach emptying, the weight loss you achieve is with a loss of maybe between 20 and 40% of your lean muscle mass. So slowing down your eating rates and eating more mindfully is a key behavior that you need to do regardless of what else you're doing. If you're going to take GLP-1 medications, you will regain the weight within 2 years of stopping it. That's the data. A huge study published in July of this year from Oxford University. GLP-1 users within a year will stop taking the medications, and within 2 years, 20 months actually, will regain much of the weight that they've put on, that they've taken off. And so there's a lot of excitement from dietitians about this technology as being a way for giving them an insight into how their participants are doing, much like we've had from using other wearables such as heart rate monitors and the like. And not to labor the point, other devices like your smartphone, your watch, your ring, they can't gather this data. And so, as we've seen with the Apple Watch was an amazing innovation, but Apple wasn't first there. There was Pebble. You may not know Pebble. Pebble was a company that was funded from a Kickstarter and made the first version of this wearable device that could do calendar and calls and everything else. But it was the health use cases from the Apple Watch that really drove the adoption. And I believe that the same will happen with glasses. A lot of people are focused on how we can take smartphone uses and apply them to glasses. Fine, navigation, calendar, notifications, whatever. But it's the health use cases that drove the adoption of that first wearable, the Apple Watch, and it'll be health uses that will drive the adoption of glasses, I believe. Our team is led by Steen Strand. He was head of hardware and investments at Snapchat. Snapchat, some of you may not know, they were one of the pioneers in wearable technologies in terms of glasses. They produced their first glasses back in 2016, and since then they've had 4 generations of smart glasses, and Steen was in charge of development of the last, I think, 3 sets of smart glasses, and he came on board last October to, he's incredibly experienced graduate of Harvard and Stanford, and he leads our company as he really understands the space intimately. As I mentioned, Christian Grzewski is our head of data science and CTO, and he leads a team of incredibly talented scientists, engineers, and researchers. The company is split across the US, UK, and North Macedonia. We've got some amazing people in our UK branch as well, and a whole range of experts in neuroscience, psychology, and engineering. So at the beginning of this talk, I asked the question, how do you feel? Do you feel excited about the future of health with smart glasses? I think so. The future is bright, and I welcome any questions you have. Thank you for your attention.
This is a product that's for B2B or B2C?
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the moment, our technology is being used by, you saw the glasses are quite bulky right now, and it's being used by researchers predominantly. And we're planning to go to market with diet-focused glasses in next year. So they're still very much a work in progress just now, but I can show you hot off the press version of the glasses that's for diet. So this is the prototype for the diet use case, which is going to be coming out next year. It's called Sense Eyewear. And I say this is focused principally around dietary health rather than facial expressions as such. We need to miniaturize the sensors that are on the front, and that's going to be probably about another 18 months of work for us to do that, which is going to be, and again, our idea is to partner with companies. We want to partner with eyewear companies, both being horizontal and vertical. We believe that for the diet use case, we're uniquely positioned to help in one sector, but the core technology has so many different uses because actually you can use the same sensor for activation, for example. So you can use the glasses as a way of, rather than having to do this the whole time to take a picture or whatever, you can use the same sensing technology to do human-computer interaction as well. Well, thank you for your attention. Thank you.